My parents kicked me out, so my sister could have her baby in my room. So I bought their house later and evicted them without warning. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. The kind of son who fixes the leaking sink before anyone notices, pays half the electric bill without being asked, and still gets told. You're so mature for your age, like it's a compliment instead of a reminder that I was never allowed to just be a son. My family isn't bad on the surface. Middle class. Suburban, the kind of people neighbors describe as so wholesome. But beneath that, there's this quiet imbalance that's always existed. My younger sister, Chloe, is 3 years younger than me and the eternal golden child. She's impulsive, emotional, a walking mess of half-finished dreams and dramatic apologies. And my parents? They eat it up. Every mistake she makes turns into a redemption story. Every minor success, like showing up on time for work, earns her a celebration dinner. Meanwhile, I'm the one patching drywall, mowing the lawn, paying off car repairs, and getting told I shouldn't expect gratitude for doing what's right. It's not like I was jealous. Not at first. I told myself this was my role, that every family needs a steady hand to hold it together. But over time, I started noticing how they'd talk about her like she was the family, and I was just the guy renting space in their story. Sometimes I'd sit at the dinner table, listening to my mom gush about Chloe's new boyfriend or how she's finally finding her path, while I quietly calculated how much I could contribute next paycheck to keep the mortgage afloat. My dad would nod proudly and say, "That's what family's for." And I'd nod too, even though I was starting to wonder who exactly that family included. I thought I was building a future with them. I didn't realize I was just keeping their house running for someone else. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind of slow, quiet morning I used to live for. I was fixing a loose cabinet hinge when my mom called out from the living room, her voice trembling with excitement. "Honey, come here. Chloe has news." Chloe was glowing, but not in the way people do when something good has happened. She was nervous, clutching her phone, twisting her hair, smiling like she was trying to convince herself this was a blessing. "I'm pregnant," she said softly. The words hit me like static. My mom gasped and clapped her hands over her mouth. My dad just stood there blinking before breaking into the fakest smile I've ever seen. "A baby," he said finally, his voice cracking. "We're going to be grandparents." I waited for the obvious follow-up question. What about Ryan? Chloe's boyfriend, the guy who'd bounced between jobs and borrowed money from me twice already. But no one mentioned him. No one mentioned responsibility, rent, or the fact that Chloe was barely holding down her part-time job at a boutique. Instead, my mom was already on Pinterest, talking about nursery themes and baby shower ideas. I congratulated her because it was the polite thing to do. She looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for my approval. But something inside me twisted when my dad said, "This family always steps up for its own," because I knew what that meant. Family was about to get expensive again, and I wasn't the one having a baby. Over the next few weeks, everything revolved around Chloe's pregnancy. The house became a planning zone. My mom hung ultrasound photos on the fridge. My dad started researching baby-proofing. One night, when I mentioned maybe moving out next year, just to get my own space, my mom's face hardened. "You'll always have a home here," she said, "unless you stop acting like family." The way she said it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like a warning. It started subtly. A few boxes stacked outside my door, a couple of my old posters taken down for cleaning. I didn't think much of it until one afternoon. I came home from work and found my mom standing in my doorway with a measuring tape. She didn't even look guilty. "We're just checking dimensions," she said casually. "Chloe's going to need space for the crib." I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. But then my dad walked in carrying a paint roller and a bucket of pale yellow paint. "We thought we'd freshen the place up a bit," he said like it was no big deal. My place. My room. The one I'd worked extra shifts to help renovate last summer. Bought the furniture myself, even fixed the window that wouldn't shut right. "Wait," I said slowly. "You're turning my room into the baby's nursery." My mom frowned like I was being unreasonable. Don't make it sound selfish. You're grown now. Chloe's going to be a mother. She needs stability. And where am I supposed to sleep? For now, maybe the couch, she said without missing a beat. It's just temporary, sweetheart. Once the baby's older, we'll figure something out. I looked at Chloe, belly barely showing, eyes downcast. She mumbled, "It's just for a while, okay?" Like she knew how wrong this was but didn't care enough to fight it. That night, I stood in my half-empty room surrounded by moving boxes labeled Chloe's stuff. My posters were gone. My tools shoved into the garage, my bed frame already dismantled. It felt like being erased one object at a time. I wanted to argue. I wanted to make them see how cruel this was. But instead, I sat on the bare floor and stared at the freshly painted wall. It was still damp, and the room smelled like baby powder and betrayal. The breaking point came faster than I expected. It was a Thursday night. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift and came home to find my bed gone. Not moved, gone. In its place was a pile of baby clothes, a new dresser, and Chloe's maternity pillow. I dropped my bag by the door, staring. Where's my stuff? My dad didn't even look up from the TV. Garage, he said flatly. We needed to make space. Make space? I repeated. For what? For Chloe? For a kid that's not even born yet? My mom came in, hands on her hips, wearing that practiced, disappointed look she'd used my entire life. Watch your tone. We've talked about this. Chloe needs the room more than you do right now. I laughed, but it came out bitter. So what? I get demoted to guest status in my own house? You're not a guest, my dad said sharply. You're family. And family sacrifices. That word, sacrifices, hit like a slap. I'd been sacrificing since I was old enough to hold a wrench, but somehow it was never enough. When I refused to move my remaining things out, the argument escalated. Chloe started crying, mumbling about how she didn't want to cause trouble. My mom rushed to comfort her, shooting me a look like I'd just ruined Christmas. My dad snapped, "You're selfish. You think about yourself while your sister's struggling." I think about myself because no one else ever does, I said quietly. The room fell silent, except for Chloe's sniffles. The next night I came home to find the locks changed. My key didn't fit. My duffel bag sat neatly on the porch. My mom cracked open the door just long enough to say, "This isn't forever. You'll understand when you have a family of your own." The door closed before I could answer, and for the first time in my life, I realized I never really had a family to begin with. That night, I slept in my car. The rain hit the windshield like static, and I kept thinking about how quiet the house had been when I left. No one came outside. No one called. Just me, my duffel bag, and the sound of Chloe's nursery mobile spinning behind a locked door. I crashed on a coworker's couch for a week before finding a rundown studio apartment downtown. It smelled like dust and broken promises, but it was mine. I remember standing in the middle of that cracked tile floor, staring at the single light bulb overhead, telling myself, at least they can't take this from me. Days blurred into weeks. I buried myself in work. Double shifts, weekend overtime, anything to stay too tired to think. My mom texted once asking if I could send money for house repairs. I didn't respond. Chloe posted her baby bump photos online, tagged "Jish Family First." The comments were full of hearts and, "You're glowing." I just scrolled past them, pretending it didn't sting. The worst part was the silence, the way no one noticed I was gone. I'd been the one who kept the house running, who remembered birthdays, who fixed things. And now, without me, they didn't even flinch. When Chloe went into labor, I found out through a Facebook post. A photo of my parents smiling beside the hospital bed, holding the baby, their grandchild. No one called. No one even sent a text. I stared at that photo for a long time. My family, complete, without me. Something in me cracked that night. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt empty. Like every ounce of love I'd poured into that house had evaporated. And in that silence, I made myself a promise. I would never depend on them again. Not for a roof. Not for warmth. Not even for acknowledgement. They taught me what family meant to them. Now, I'd teach myself what it meant to me. Years passed quietly. I stopped waiting for calls that never came and started building something of my own. My job at the auto shop turned into a management position. I learned how to invest, how to save, how to grow without needing anyone's approval. Every success was a silent rebellion. Proof that I didn't need to be their afterthought to matter. I kept my distance, but they didn't. My mom would occasionally text about helping out or ask if I could lend Chloe some money for diapers, formula, or rent. I sent nothing. Each message felt like a test, not of generosity, but of boundaries. And I was finally learning to keep mine. Then, one random Saturday, I drove through my old neighborhood. I hadn't been there in years, but something pulled me back. When I turned the corner, I saw it, my childhood home. The paint was faded, the lawn unkempt, the windows dull. And right there in the yard stood a bright red for sale sign. I parked across the street, my heart pounding. The curtains were still the same floral pattern my mom loved. The mailbox still had our family name on it, chipped and rusting. For a moment I wasn't angry, just sad. Sad that the house I'd once fixed with my own hands had decayed the same way our family did, quietly, from the inside out. Curiosity got the better of me. I called the realtor listed on the sign, pretending to be an investor. She told me the owners were an older couple looking to downsize after some financial strain. My breath caught. I didn't even have to ask who. My parents were selling the house. My house. The same one they'd kicked me out of to make room for someone else's future. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Not out of joy, but realization. The power was shifting. I spent the next few days digging, not out of spite, but curiosity. Old habits die hard. I still wanted to understand them. But what I found shocked me. Through public records, I learned they were drowning in debt. Unpaid property taxes, late mortgage payments, and medical bills stacked high. The house I once kept standing was now one missed payment away from foreclosure. And Chloe, she wasn't doing any better. Ryan had left her months ago, apparently for someone less complicated. She was back at my parents' house with 2 kids and no job. It should have made me angry. The poetic irony of it all. But I didn't feel hate. I felt calm, detached, like I was finally seeing the storm from a distance instead of standing in the middle of it. I met with the realtor again, this time under my own name. When I told her I wanted to make an offer, she raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" she asked. "The owners are in a tough spot. It might get emotional." I smiled faintly. "That's all right. I've had time to prepare." To keep things clean, I bought the house through my business partner, a shell company we'd set up for investment projects. No red flags, no family drama. Within a month, the papers were signed, the deal closed, and the property legally belonged to me. The day I got the keys, I drove there alone. The driveway was cracked, the porch light flickered, and the house seemed smaller than I remembered. Still, when I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't in years. Control. From the kitchen window, I saw Chloe's car in the driveway and my parents sitting on the porch, sipping coffee, completely unaware that their landlord was now their son. For years, they'd decided who stayed and who left. Now, that decision was mine. Owning that house felt surreal. Every creak in the floorboards, every dent in the walls. I remembered exactly how they got there. The place was a time capsule of everything I'd done for people who never saw me. But now it was mine, legally and completely. I decided not to act right away. I let things settle. The realtor handled the transition paperwork, and my parents were given a grace period to find new housing before rent officially kicked in. They didn't suspect a thing. They thought some faceless investment group had bought the house. The irony made me laugh. I visited the property under the guise of a maintenance inspector, clipboard in hand and a cap pulled low. My dad barely glanced at me as he complained about the new owners raising rent. My mom stood nearby, arms crossed, talking about how unfair it was after all the years they'd lived there. Chloe was inside, yelling at her kids, the same chaotic whirlwind as ever. When I stepped into my old room, I froze. The walls were still that soft yellow, the color they'd painted when they kicked me out. Only now it wasn't a nursery anymore. It was a cluttered storage space, overflowing with old toys, broken furniture, and boxes labeled Chloe's stuff. I ran my hand over the cracked paint, and it hit me. This was where I'd slept, dreamed, and been erased all at once. Now it was nothing more than a junk room. I walked through every inch of that house, listening to the sounds of their laughter, their small complaints, their ordinary life. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like the quiet ghost of someone they'd buried long ago, returned to reclaim what was his. As I left, I glanced back one last time. They had no idea the storm was already on its way. 3 months later, the grace period expired. My lawyer handled it cleanly. Official notices, stamped and dated, delivered to the doorstep of the same house that once held my childhood trophies. The tenants had 30 days to vacate or face legal action. That morning, I sat in my apartment sipping coffee when my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Mom, some landlord just served us eviction papers. Do you know anything about this? I stared at the screen for a while before setting the phone down. I didn't answer. By noon, my dad was calling, over and over, voicemail after voicemail, each one angrier than the last. They can't do this. We've lived here 30 years. Then another one, quieter. Son, if you know anyone who can help us, please, call me back. Chloe's meltdown hit social media next. A Facebook rant full of all caps and exclamation marks, calling the new owners heartless for kicking out an innocent family. She wrote, "We're losing our home and no one cares." Thousands of sympathetic comments poured in. I scrolled through them all, feeling nothing. That evening, I finally answered my mom's call. Her voice cracked through the receiver. "It's horrible, sweetheart. They're making us leave. We don't have anywhere to go. You're good with money. Can you talk to them?" I took a slow breath. "I don't need to talk to them, Mom." A pause. "What do you mean?" "Because I already did." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that carries years of things left unsaid. "You bought it?" She whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "And I'm not your landlord. I'm the son you threw out when you needed space for someone else." Her breath hitched, and for once, she didn't have a rehearsed response. "I didn't lose my home, Mom," I said quietly. "You did. They were gone within a month. No screaming, no scene, just boxes, moving trucks, and silence. I drove by once after the last day, and the porch that used to glow with my mom's hanging lights was empty. The curtains were gone. The mailbox nameplate had been ripped off. For the first time in my life, that house looked exactly how it had made me feel. Hollow. I started fixing it up piece by piece. Fresh paint, new floors, replaced the squeaky door hinges I'd once begged my dad to let me fix. Each repair felt like therapy. I wasn't erasing memories. I was reclaiming them. The house no longer smelled like resentment and dust. It smelled like new beginnings. Neighbors stopped by, curious. They didn't recognize me at first. One of them, Mrs. Evans from next door, smiled and said, "It's good to see someone finally taking care of this place. The last owners really let it go." I just nodded. Yeah, sometimes people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. At night, I'd sit in my old room, now painted a deep navy instead of that suffocating yellow, and think about everything that led me there. I wasn't proud of the eviction. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was accountability. I'd given that family everything: time, effort, loyalty, and they'd taught me that love without respect is servitude. So I stopped serving. When the renovation was done, I stood in the empty living room and whispered, "It's over." Not bitterly, not with hate, just finality. They lost their house, but I finally found my peace. It had been 6 months since the eviction when I heard the knock. I opened the door and froze. Chloe stood there, clutching a worn-out purse, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. She looked nothing like the golden child I grew up resenting. "Hey," she said softly. "Can I come in?" For a moment I wanted to shut the door, but something in her tone, tired, defeated, stopped me. I nodded and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the place like she was walking through a memory. "It looks different," she said. "It should," I replied. "It's not your nursery anymore." That hit her. She bit her lip, tears pooling. "They never told me the truth, you know. I thought you left because you wanted to. Mom always said you couldn't handle being around the baby." I laughed, sharp, hollow. "Yeah, that's one way to put it." She sat on the edge of the couch, fidgeting with her keys. "I didn't know they kicked you out, I swear. I found out everything after you bought the place. Mom told me, and she still thinks you did it to punish her." "Maybe I did," I admitted quietly. "But not because I hate them. I just needed them to feel what it's like to lose something you thought would always be yours." She nodded, crying now. "They're still angry. But I get it. You were always the one holding everything together. I just didn't see it back then." I sat across from her, arms folded. "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, Chloe." She looked up, wiping her eyes. "I know. I just didn't want to leave things like this." For the first time, there was no tension between us. Just two people realizing how much a family can break you before it teaches you who you are. A few months after Chloe's visit, I put the house up for sale. People asked me why I'd sell a place I'd fought so hard to reclaim. But the truth is, once I finally got it back, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't that kid desperate for belonging. I was a man who'd learned the difference between a home and a habit. Before the sale closed, I spent one last night there. No furniture, no noise, just me, the echo of my footsteps and the hum of the refrigerator I'd installed myself. The house creaked in that familiar rhythm, the same one that used to lull me to sleep as a boy. Only this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. I walked through every room, running my hand along the walls. The living room where I'd done homework on the floor, the hallway where I'd once hung family photos, and finally, my room. The navy blue paint still looked fresh. The air smelled like clean wood and something new. Closure. I sat on the window ledge watching the sunrise break through the curtains. In that moment, I finally understood something. My parents kicked me out thinking they were protecting their version of family. But in doing so, they freed me to build mine. One built on self-respect, not guilt. When I handed the keys to the new owners, a young couple expecting their first child, the woman smiled and said, "We'll take good care of it." I smiled back. That's all I wanted. As I walked to my car, I looked back one last time, the house glowing in the morning light, no longer a symbol of pain, but of everything I'd overcome. Voiceover. They took my room. I took back my story. Then I drove away, leaving behind the house that once rejected me, and realizing maybe it hadn't. Maybe it was just waiting for me to grow strong enough to let it go.